She began as a concubine, she ended as an emperor. In between, she rewrote history. In a world designed by men, for men, one woman dared to claim the ultimate prize. She outwitted, outmaneuvered, and outlasted every rival who stood in her way. But how did she do it? How did a girl, brought to the palace for the emperor's pleasure, seize the dragon throne and rule over one of the world's greatest empires? This is the story of Wu Zetian, the woman who became a living god. Her story begins not in shadow, but in privilege. Born in 624 CE to a wealthy aristocratic family, Wu Zetian was fortunate. Her father, a chancellor of the Tang Dynasty, held progressive views for his time, believing that girls too should be educated. He encouraged her to read and write, to study politics and history. This education forged a razor-sharp intellect and a fiery ambition that would define her life. At the tender age of 14, her beauty and wit caught the eye of the palace, and she was brought to the court of the great emperor Taizong. She wasn't just another pretty face. She was a strategic thinker, a keen observer of power. While other concubines vied for favor with charms, Wu Zetian learned the intricate dance of court politics. She listened to the whispers in the hallways, studied the alliances and rivalries, and waited. Her time in Taizong's court was an apprenticeship in power, but the emperor, perhaps wary of her ambition, never truly elevated her. When he died, her world should have ended. Tradition was absolute. Upon an emperor's death, his childless concubines were to have their heads shaved and be sent to a Buddhist convent for the rest of their lives, a sentence of quiet obscurity. Wu Zetian was no exception. She took her vows and entered the Ganye temple, seemingly destined to fade into history. But Wu Zetian was never one for tradition. Before Taizong's death, she had already formed a secret forbidden connection with the crown prince, Li Zhi. He was captivated by her brilliance and spirit. When he ascended the throne as emperor Gaozong, he could not forget the woman in the monastery. In an unprecedented and scandalous move, he brought her back to the palace. Her return sent shockwaves through the court. It was a flagrant violation of Confucian ethics, but for Wu Zetian, it was a second chance. And this time she would not be denied. She was no longer a naive girl. She was a woman with a singular focus: power. Back in the viper's nest of the Forbidden City, Wu Zetian began her methodical climb. Her main rivals were the current Empress Wang and the favored consort Zhao. They saw her as an upstart and tried to sideline her, but they severely underestimated their opponent. Wu Zetian played the long game. She cultivated allies, feigned humility, and won the complete devotion of Emperor Gaozong. The final move was as brilliant as it was brutal. When her own infant daughter died, she accused Empress Wang of the crime. Historians debate whether the empress was framed or if Wu committed the unspeakable act herself, but the result was the same. Heartbroken and enraged, the emperor chose to believe Wu. Empress Wang and consort Zhao were deposed, imprisoned, and later met a gruesome end. Wu Zetian was named empress consort, but she wasn't content to be the power behind the throne. As Emperor Gaozong's health began to fail, weakened by a series of strokes, Wu Zetian stepped out from behind the curtain. She began assisting him with state affairs, but soon she was the one making the decisions. She proved to be a masterful administrator, promoting talented officials regardless of their social standing and consolidating her control over the government. She was empress in name but emperor in all but title. For years, she ruled alongside her ailing husband, a phenomenon known as the two saints reigning together. But Wu Zetian was preparing for her final unthinkable step. After Gaozong's death, she placed her sons on the throne, first Zhongzong, then Ruizong. But they were mere puppets. She ruled through them as Empress Dowager and Regent, ruthlessly eliminating any opposition from the powerful Tang imperial clan. Then, in the year 690 CE, she did what no woman in 4,000 years of Chinese history had ever done. She deposed her son, cast aside the Tang Dynasty, and declared a new dynasty of her own, the Zhao. She ascended the throne not as empress, but as Huangti or emperor. The word itself was exclusively male. Wu Zetian claimed it for herself, becoming the first and only woman to ever rule China in her own right. This act was a direct challenge to the Confucian patriarchy that formed the bedrock of Chinese society. The backlash was immense, but Wu was prepared. She silenced her critics, established a network of secret police to root out dissent, and embarked on a reign that would change China forever. As emperor, Wu Zetian proved her doubters wrong. She wasn't just a usurper. She was a capable and visionary ruler. To break the grip of the old aristocracy that despised her, she dramatically expanded the imperial examination system. This allowed men of talent from lower status families to enter the civil service, creating a bureaucracy that was loyal to her, not to the old Tang clans. She understood the power of ideology. Knowing that Confucianism would never truly accept a female ruler, she championed Buddhism, elevating it to a state religion. She even had Buddhist scriptures discovered that prophesied the reincarnation of a female savior, subtly legitimizing her own reign. Beyond politics, she was a great patron of the arts and literature, and her reign saw a flourishing of culture. She commissioned grand architectural projects, including giant statues and pavilions, symbols of her power and the prosperity of her new dynasty. She stabilized the empire's borders and fostered economic growth. Wu Zetian was proving that a woman could not only rule, but could rule effectively. But her reign had a dark side. Power was seized with blood, and it was maintained with fear. Wu Zetian's use of a secret police force was infamous. Accusations, often anonymous, could lead to imprisonment, exile, or execution. She conducted ruthless purges of the old imperial family and any officials she deemed a threat. Court life was a web of paranoia where a wrong word could mean death. Her critics, both then and now, paint her as a cruel tyrant, a monster who murdered her own children and rivals to satisfy her lust for power. Her supporters, however, point to the stability and prosperity of her reign. They argue that her harsh methods were necessary to hold on to power in a system that was built to reject her at every turn. Was she a ruthless despot or a pragmatic visionary? She was both. Her rule was a delicate balance of progress and purges, of cultural flourishing and chilling fear. She was a complex figure who used every tool at her disposal, intellect, charm, ruthlessness, and reform to forge her own destiny. In 705 CE, after 15 years as emperor, an ailing Wu Zetian was forced to abdicate in a palace coup. Her son Zhongzong was restored.